Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to day 6 of the Climate Smart Agriculture webinar series. In keeping with the analogy I used yesterday was double day. Today, we're celebrating roots, Caribbean roots. So we're celebrating Andre's 200 win, Bajan father, Trinity mother. We're taking all the credit we can get. So we're on to day 6. And in keeping with the Olympics theme, we are doing field events and indoor events today. Open field and protected agricultural systems with particular reference to vegetables. My name is Steve Maxime and I'm your moderator for today. I know you're disappointed, you're expecting Dale, but this is one opportunity where I have a chance to pass the baton to him, and I'm taking my time in doing it. Dale is going to be a little late, so you're stuck with me for the next couple of minutes. Today, we have two eminent presenters. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me just tell you what the format is. Each presenter has 20 minutes to present. I've spoken to them before. At 17 minutes, I will tell them that they have 3 minutes left and they will wrap up. We'll have both presentations and then we'll have 50 minutes for questions and answers. Without any further ado, I want to welcome you, remind you to register, because there were a number of people asking yesterday whether you're going to be getting a certificate of participation or not. Those of you who are taking time off from your jobs, etc., you will be receiving your certification, but of course you have to provide us with your correct email address, etc. So without any further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first female presenter for the series. I mentioned this yesterday, that I was really literally tired of this pile of man them. So we're on our first presenter today is Ms. Francine Webb Lawrence. She's a senior plant health food safety officer in the Department of Technology, Training and Technical Information at RADA. RADA is the Chief Agricultural Extension arm of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries in Jamaica. She has been working in the agriculture sector for over 15 years in the areas of biological control, integrated pest management, agrometeorology, and food safety at the primary production level. Her training includes plant-wise plant doctor, trainer of trainers, and data manager, good agricultural practices and preventative controls for human food, global gap farm assurer on crops, mostly fruits and vegetables, pesticide residue evaluation and estimation of MRLs, and that is maximum residue levels for those of you like Dale. Level 4 assessor of NVQs, and NVQ stands for National Vocational Qualifications, Jamaica. Francine holds a Master's of Science degree in Plant Production and Protection from the University of the West Indies, and a Master of Advanced Studies degree in Integrated Crop Management from the University of Neuchâtel in Switzerland, and is currently completing a Master's of Business Administration with qualified to discuss vegetable production, climate smart agriculture. Francine Webb Lawrence. Francine, over to you. Francine, I know you're disappointed it's not Dale, but you're gonna have to present even if I was the one introducing you. My apologies. Desi, is Francine that disappointed? Ladies and gents, once more I failed. Here I did my big open introduction for Francine, and she's not yet on. Can I take you back to master control now for a replay of the 200 meters final, or do I have to provide a fill-up?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sorry about this. Francine seems to be having some technical difficulties. We're trying to get through to her, but if not, we might have to just move on to.
I like how you say that. Just have to move on to Christian.
Well, it's Christian that is not ready, so that it's not too sudden for him. Try and get through to her to see what is happening.
Okay, so whilst you're waiting, I think it falls on me now to explain why I've taken liberties with speaking about Christian. I want to publicly proclaim that Christian is my friend, even though he may not admit it. So I can take liberties like that. But I'm sorry that Dion has been having some issues. Christian, are you in a position to continue this?
I can continue. I can continue. I prefer cricket, so I'm ready to jump in the crease.
Okay, but just remember you're overnight. You're the overnight watchman. You didn't really choose to open, right?
Yeah.
Getting up by default. So let me just quickly introduce Christian, and then you're getting their presentation. Okay?
Yeah. Sure.
So let me do that. Although I can do this from memory. Christian has been employed at the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute as a climate change and development specialist since September 2016. He works at the intersection of climate change science, food security, and the development of smallholder farmers and rural livelihoods. He's particularly interested in interdisciplinary and participatory methods and approaches to confronting complex issues resulting from both the biophysical impacts of climate change and the socioeconomic environments in which people exist. Currently, Christian is involved in research seeking to answer the questions how best to design, deliver, and utilize climate information services to support decision-making and innovation among farming communities. Now, I know that Christian is particularly interested in transformational changes, so I'm going to take this opportunity to transform into, a fairly decent moderator, and without any other comment, introduce Christian. Christian, please take over.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Good morning, all invited participants, colleagues. It is a pleasure to be able to present to you, though unfortunate that Francine is having some technical difficulties. I will not cast myself as a specialist in protected agriculture. However, I do raise has interest in how we can leverage this technology in our climate, recognizing that we do have I share a little bit about that in one of my slides. But I do want to take the opportunity today to present surrounding the topic of protected agriculture, and in particular, how we could frame that under the rubric of climate smart compliance, climate smart agricultural compliance. Because as I would show in my presentation is that I don't believe that protected agriculture systems are always inherently climate smart protected agriculture. So what is protected agriculture? I have two simple definitions here: technologies that allow plant coverage and microclimate control, as well as we could also look at it from a modified environment that is aimed at improving growing conditions for plants. And all this is under the idea that plants in certain conditions and certain contexts do not have these enough coverage and favorable climate in which they can strive. I just want to take some time to run through some models of protected agriculture systems. One of the most basic and probably most low cost is low tunnels or row covers, they call them as well. And these really feature clear plastic materials over plant rows, supported by hoops, no higher than 3 feet, and made out of steel and different material. And the idea is really to protect against the weather, as I explained before, and in particular pests. Some of these are often used in conjunction with plastic mulch and drip irrigation. And these are some of the commodities that they are typically used to grow. I just have a quick picture here of to illustrate what a low tunnel or crop cover or row cover rather looks like. Similarly, there's walking or polytunnels, and it's similar to what I just showed. Only thing being is that it's quite taller, greater than 6 feet, 6 feet and more. And the idea is really to allow easy mobility for workers to move within the structure. And this is another picture of a picture here to illustrate what a polytunnel looks like. Again, these are typically used to grow vegetables, watermelons, melons, tomatoes, peppers in particular. You tend to find tomatoes and peppers in these systems quite a lot. Again, you have another simple structure on the greenhouse is shade houses, or sometimes complete insect proofing, but they tend to look very similar. And the idea is to protect the crops from pests and disease incidences. And perhaps most important is the production. They are typically used for the production of seedlings, similar to nurseries, to ensure that there's good quality seedlings. Oftentimes, even to transfer to our open field systems. And this is a picture here of the shade house on the left hand side, as well as the entire insect screen house on the right side. But then you have the more complicated and bigger structures that fall under greenhouse. They are particularly covered structures with transparent and translucent material that would allow for sunlight to reach the biomass inside the structure. The idea of greenhouses were always intended for radiation, and mention again later the origin of greenhouses and why we need to be particularly aware of its use in our context in the Caribbean. Oftentimes, there are provisions for controlling the internal environment, and they are used to grow a wider variety of array of vegetables, as opposed to the crop cover or the polytunnels. You find some with tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, even strawberries, and typically in a lot of the countries that these technologies have originated, they've been using them for ornamentals. They allow for off-season cultivation, consistent quality produce, and a very high output per unit area if managed well. This is a one type of system that is typical for the Caribbean. I will come back at this to where it can get very commercial, very huge, where you have greenhouses that can cover acres upon acres in some parts of the world. I do want to highlight that my experience in protected agriculture has been the concept of controlling or reusing hard structures to offer some resilience to the hurricane conditions. When I got here in 2017, and I say here as in St. Kitts and Nevis, I had the opportunity to be involved in the shaping of a concept note on protected agriculture systems. And one of the things that we looked for is a technology that or a model that would offer us the opportunity and the ability to produce even during hurricane conditions, recognizing that we are in the hurricane belt. Again, I wouldn't pose myself as an expert, because one of the things I would say is that we have incurred several challenges constructing this model. And the idea really is for us to do some feasibility studies on such a model. So there are a number of questions that we ourselves have, but we are in the process of conducting research on this model. But one of the things I mentioned very early is that not all protected agricultural systems are inherently climate smart. Just because you have a shade house, a greenhouse, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are climate smart compliant. And one of the things I mentioned before is that protected agriculture, I think is always good to remember that this technology has originated in temperate countries for temperate conditions. I mean, yes, we can arguably, we can, roll back a couple of decades ago where, we see our forefathers and grandparents. I remember my dad having a structure that one could consider protected, offering some shade to crops below, just merely used out with bamboo and other straws and grasses lying around. But many models in the tropics, as well as arid and polar regions, are certainly poorly adapted systems, and they lack optimization. The implication for the Caribbean, where we have high temperatures and humidity levels, and also susceptibility, even when that isn't the case or could be controlled, there's also a level of susceptibility to wind conditions. Have experience where even during the year without hurricane conditions, a lot of shade houses and greenhouses, not simply because of their design or the material, but because of things like orientation and location, have been very much battered by wind conditions. And again, these are not necessarily hurricane winds, but even during the year, normal times outside of hurricanes. Sometimes managing these systems can be costly. And if we remember, some of the tenets of climate smart agriculture is the combination of not just a model that is adapted to climate change, but one that is also mitigating, as well as one that is productive. So I with my limited experience, I believe that there's a case for protected agriculture in the Caribbean. It still exists that there's a need for agricultural productivity on limited land. We are small island developing states, and therefore there is and will continue to be high competition for lands in our member states, and therefore technologies that would offer us the opportunity to be quite productive, as well as utilizing existing lands, I believe is one that we need to pay attention to. There's need for climate resilient production systems. Certainly, again, in a region that is prone to hurricane and also extreme drought conditions, protected agriculture do offer us the opportunity to be resilient under these conditions and have production systems that continue to produce in such an environment. And of course, under food and nutrition security, there is always the need for safe and consistent quantity and quality of food. Again, this presents a case for protected agriculture, but not by itself. And I believe here in the Caribbean, two of the key areas that I believe that we can pay more attention to when it comes to protected agriculture, especially when seeking climate smart compliance, is good agricultural practices and efficient energy systems and models, as well as those that are environmentally sustainable, that would offer us the opportunity to lower our temperatures and humidity levels in our systems. The first one I want to mention, because even when we have the opportunity to control the environment inside, I've seen in many cases, in a lot of cases, where there are not good agricultural practices in greenhouses. And this could be for many reasons, but without going into that, one of the things that tend to happen in greenhouses, and because it's a enclosed structure to some extent, is that you don't have the natural enemies of pests a lot of times inside these agricultural systems. That's one example. So what you tend to have happening in a lot of greenhouse and shade houses and different protected agriculture models, where there isn't good management and isn't good agricultural practices, is a buildup of pests and diseases. And when those get in such a system, it's really easy for them to multiply. It really is a favorable climate that they can strive in. But turning to energy efficiency and using efficient energy as well as environmentally safe energy or sustainable energy models, I just wanted to take this time to raise a number of areas or a number of technologies that are being used around the world, especially in the developing countries. And one of the first ones is the idea of passive cooling. One of those techniques is using ventilation in our greenhouses. I have an illustration here where in a split roof greenhouse, there is an opening or relatively small opening at the top of the greenhouse that's oriented in such a way to allow the prevailing wind to sort of extract somewhat or create a vacuum somewhat to draw some of the buildup of the heat inside the shade houses or greenhouses and pull them out of the structure. Sometimes this is used in conjunction with the side walls that are netted, that would allow some air to move inside the greenhouse and then up into the opening on top of the split roof. I hope I explained that well enough. This is another this time the shade house has two as well as another opening to allow the air to be extracted. One of the things that is also being used is geothermal cooling, and this is the idea of allowing air to go below the surface that tends to be 2 meters, 3 meters below the surface. The temperature of the ground tend to be relatively stable and depending on the time of the year, quite cool. So the idea of geothermal cooling is to allow air from the outside to enter a tube or a tube that has one opening to allow this air to enter, and a horizontal portion of that tube would be below the surface, and it's there that the air is allowed to cool given its surrounding environment, and it's this cool air that is allowed to then enter a room And here the idea is in a greenhouse to cool such a space. And some people have been able to get up to 5 degrees lower temperatures in such a system. Again, this is depending on location, orientation, and number of other factors.
Sorry to interrupt you, Christian. You have 3 minutes left.
3 minutes. Thank you, Steve. Low-cost technology. One of these are the use of extracting fans or ventilating fans, depending on how we position them. And this is an illustration of that here. The use of renewable energy. Again, I want to close with a point lower down. But the idea of using solar panels, wind turbines, wind energy, and ideally, what I see the future for protected agriculture in the Caribbean is models that are designed to sustain crop growth, but while importantly cooperating with the environment, leveraging what we have available to us, and then integrating that into our production systems, our protected agriculture systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christian. I'm now going to use my prerogative as moderator to attempt to introduce Francine Webb-Lawrence again. Ms. Webb-Lawrence, are you hearing me? Are you in a position to?
Yes, I am hearing you.
Oh, great. And you're in a position to present now?
Yes, I am. My apologies for earlier. I was not hearing at all.
Oh, sorry. That is not uncommon with me. Most people tune me out anyhow. Welcome to today's presentation. I already introduced you, so you'll have to beg my forgiveness if I don't read out your resume again. But
no problem.
Has been prepped for you long in advance of your arrival. Okay, so please go ahead.
Thank you.
And you have 20 minutes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you this morning in this continuing series regarding climate smart agriculture. And I will be looking at vegetable production, open field systems. And so without further ado, I will start.
Can you go into slide view?
I am trying, it is not moving.
Okay. If not, we're seeing what you have.
Okay. Let me just try this again.
We lost your screen, we're seeing you now.
Are you seeing anything?
There you go.
Okay. So we're looking at vegetable production, and the webinar so far has some objectives of looking at climate smart agriculture along some objectives, looking at resource conservation, looking at energy use, looking at safety, biodiversity support, and also greenhouse gas emissions reduction rather. So my focus today is to look at biodiversity support. So I'll be looking, however briefly, at land clearing, agrochemical impact, limiting invasive species, and ecosystems services impact. So let's go into it. Okay, we have been talking for now 3 weeks about the impact of climate change. And in just setting the context for this presentation, I just want to reiterate some of the adverse effects of climate change We talk about the intensity and the frequency of natural disasters. We look at rainfall variability. We talk about drought, floods.
Francine, but were your slides supposed to progress? We're still your initial slide.
Oh, my apologies. I don't know what's happening.
No worries.
Is it moving?
Nope, we're seeing.
All right, let me stop and do this share again.
Okay. We are adjusting your time accordingly, so no worries.
Thank you.
Right, we're seeing your cover, your initial slide. Could you try to
It's not moving?
No, it's not advancing now.
All right, so I'm going to just take off the second monitor. I think it may be giving me some challenges.
So you're going to start on slide 3?
Yes.
Right.
It is still not advancing to slideshow. I don't know what
If push comes to shove, Francine, maybe you can just advance it using the.
Are you seeing slide 3?
Is it the one with objectives and?
Oh my goodness.
Is it the one with objectives?
It is. It's objectives is okay. It's up now.
It's moving now.
Can you see that?
So maybe you should just hold it there and to be safe.
Okay. Are you still seeing my screen?
Nope, we're not. We're not now. We're back to your cover slide.
Oh no. Okay.
No. We're good now. We're into open field considerations.
Okay, so we went through this. All right, my computer is moving quite slowly on this system.
No
problem.
All right.
So we looked at, we're talking now about the adverse effects of climate change. We talk about climate-related natural disasters, rainfall variability, droughts, floods, increased temperatures, and all of these lead into very fragile ecosystems. Now, in talking about, in dealing with this topic in context, we want to first look at the role that our policymakers play in all of this. So with respect to Jamaica's example, the government of Jamaica in their Vision 2030 highlights that the impact of climate variability and change is a threat to sustainable development. And as such, you will need a framework which will look at corrective and preventative action in order to mitigate against this. And so it is an important underpinning for all the actions, especially at the ground level, that will take place for this kind of framework to be in place for you to deal with the effects of climate change. Now, I also wanted to start off with looking at crop suitability, because as these adverse effects affect us, it is going to impact on the type of crops that we can grow and how well they will grow. So one such example, the use of models to determine your crop suitability. And this example that I took out is from an FAO report, which looked at the minimum and maximum monthly temperatures. It looked at rainfall, and it came up with a suitability index. So this example is looking at a number, they looked at 14 key crops. And what they did was to come up with a suitability index for where you are now based on your current climatic conditions. They looked at your suitability in 2030 and also in 2050 based on the predictions for increased temperatures, for reduced rainfall, and the associated changes as well. And so with respect to 2030, you can see based on these examples of the 14 that I have up here, that a number of the crops came out for 2030 with a rating of above 80, which would indicate quite good suitability for production in these cases. The point I wanted to bring across here is that we have to now embrace the science in order to move forward based on the changes that are taking place in order to help in determining where our limited resources are placed, right? And so that is just one such example. So this would then lead into now us looking at maybe possibly looking at different locations based on the conditions where these are traditionally grown, and also in terms of research, so that we can probably look at more or improved varieties for now these new conditions that we will face.
Colleagues, I think we may have lost Francine for a bit. Given the vagaries of internet connectivity in this part of the world, we have to always have a game plan in place. And for today, part of our game plan involves fellow trainee Christian. So Christian, we are going to stand by to see if Francine rejoins us. But if not, I will go to the Q&A and we'll start tackling some of the questions that may be there. If you're up to that, Christian.
Sure.
So colleagues, could you just give me a second to confirm that I can't get Francine back, and then we'll tackle something. We have a question from Gomez. How purified water is a must in this environment? I take it the environment of protected agriculture. Christian, do you want to tackle that? Do you need purified water? And a second part of that same question, that same questioner, is how productivity increases due to this development. I'm taking that as a rough translation of what Senor Gomez is asking us.
Sure. The purified, I don't know that purified water in a purification process, I don't know that that is required for this environment. Of course, clean water and even soft water is very recommended in such a system. And you can get that from rainwater, you can get that from even the public water supply, and that's often well treated enough for protected agriculture. The productivity, how does the productivity increase? To my knowledge, in such a space, in such a greenhouse space, because of the controlled environment, as well as control that would allow a level of optimization, maybe not full optimization in most cases, but optimization nevertheless, that would allow a plant and crops to perform well under such an environment, so that the yield is quite higher a lot of times in protected agriculture systems. That's one. The second thing I could think about is oftentimes in some protected agriculture models, especially those that are quite closed off to the external environment, you tend to introduce or at least implement some of the conditions or some of the variables, such as carbon dioxide, that plants need to strive in such a system. So you artificially almost implement or introduce this gas, and it has been found that in those models, again, the productivity tend to be higher because you're able to give sometimes even more carbon dioxide than the environment would allow. That increases the productivity in these developments. Of course, there's limits, there's thresholds to how much we can give in such an environment and expect to get back. But that really depends on the technology or the model, which really, as I explained before, is really a matter of research for us currently. I hope I answered your question, Mr. Gomez.
If you haven't, could you please retype in the question and answer? But I'd like to go on to another question here from Lambert Chester. In your low shade houses, how do you go about harvesting? Are the shades movable to facilitate pest control and harvesting?
Yes, such as the crop cover, you can remove them. I've seen cases where the entire structure is taken up, broken apart, and moved from over the plants, or you can just remove the shade cloth or the polyethylene, as the case may be, to allow for harvesting and pest control.
Thank you, Christian. We have a very interesting question here from anonymous attendee. Person seems to be showing up a lot. There's only one anonymous attendee. Anyhow, the question is, I know protected agriculture is the focus here, but what about hydroponics, aquaponics, vertical planting, etc.? What are the considerations for these methods in climate smart agriculture?
Full consideration. I want to say that is not this morning's presentation wasn't to exclude these, but just with the time allotment, I wanted to focus on where some of the drawbacks in protected agriculture oftentimes. But these are quite complementary to protected agriculture, and even our dear moderator, who is a friend of mine, would have said in the earliest parts of this series that some of the protected or agriculture be more, in his experience, that tend to gain a lot of smart companies are those that are aquaponic in nature. So yes, they are part of the considerations. Vertical planting is part of the technology that we are using here, as well as hydroponics. That is what I have experience in, and I know that aquaponics is in fact a very productive model in all such cases. So yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Christian. Let me just put out an appeal for Francine. Francine, if you get back on and you want to rejoin us officially, just unmute your mic and hear me out.
I'm back on.
I suspected so. Are you in a position to continue presenting?
Yes, yes, I am. I just had a power cut. So I will.
All right. So I think you're on renewable now.
I do have had some contingencies in place, but they also fell through.
All right. Okay.
So I'm back here.
So you want to pick up where you left off, and
yes,
I mean, try to accommodate you as best we can. Sure. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you. My apologies for that. I had a power cut, but let us continue. We were looking at the crop suitability, and I just wanted to reiterate, I don't know exactly at what point I fell off, but just to mention that the point of bringing this example up is just to illustrate that we have to use the science, and I know Dr. Rankin had went into a number of models. So in going forward, we will have to embrace this kind of technology in informing us And again, in this precision agriculture environment where you're using ICTs to make more informed management decision and to increase yields, this is one of the tools in which we will have to embrace in going forward. So in continuing, we are looking at some considerations, and this is based on the time frame, and because I had so many challenges in just getting on here, I just wanted to entertain you in a series of discussions around open field climate smart agriculture. It was said before, it is not exclusive from other systems, so such as your good agricultural practices and other sections which were mentioned in previous weeks. In fact, it helps in complementing all of these practices within the agricultural system. And so you want to consider where you're located. Now, I am in extension agriculture, and so we get a number of people coming into my office regarding their interest in going into agriculture. And so for the younger that are coming in, quite interested in getting the information before you begin. And I think that is a good approach going forward, because such as with the pocket that I just had just now, planning is important, and you have to look at contingencies and how you can mitigate against what you are likely going to face. And so your history as to how your land performs under drought conditions and under flood conditions, looking at the size, your topography, what is your existing vegetation, what is your weed population like, all of those are important in considering where you choose, and also will impact on or influence where you will, what land clearing systems you will utilize. Wow. Okay. Now, soil health was mentioned before. We looked at soil, emphasize that's really important in open field systems. This is your media you are utilizing for, and one question that I would bring into play here is, what is your intent? What's your goal? Are you in this for the short run, or are you in this for the long run? Because soil health it doesn't give you immediate returns. So what your investment is going to be medium to long term. So are you in this for the long haul? What are your plans? It will also influence how you will invest in your soil health. Your soil health is important because it will also help in determining your pest pressures as well, including diseases. And it will also help in looking at your water holding capacity. Your organic matter is critically important, and all of those were discussed before. But I just want to reiterate that soil health is critically important. It is something within Jamaica that is a weak link, and that's something that we have to seriously look at. And it begins by looking at where you are and in setting your goals. So a soil test is going to be a critical component in looking at where you are. It's going to determine what you will do, and also what nutrients you have and what you will need based on your crop choices. So that is critically important as well. Now, with respect to agrochemical impact, when we talk about climate smart agriculture and the impact of climate change, we know that that has a serious impact on our pest population. Now, I want to use a classic example in Jamaica, and I will quickly move to that. But up to 40% of food crops worldwide are lost each year due to pests, and pests including diseases. Now, what that means is that we have a serious over-reliance on pesticides here in Jamaica. We have environmental contamination as a result. We have poisoning also resulting from that. And of course, all 3 R's, pest resistance, pest resurgence, and pest replacements, which are critical factors for consideration. Now, I wanted to use a classic example within Jamaica here in looking at this point of the beta armyworm within Jamaica. Now, the beta armyworm is what I would consider to be a classic climate change pest problem in Jamaica. And you may or may not have heard about it, but if you just allow me now, I'm just gonna jump to another presentation. I know my time is limited. So beta armyworm in Jamaica, we have record of this particular pest. It's a lepidopteran pest. It's a pest that does most of its damage within the caterpillar stage, so the larval stage. And as the name suggests, it's they work together as an army and they eat quite ferociously. You can see some of it will not go into slide show, but I'm just gonna proceed. In 2009, you can recall we had a serious drought spell in Jamaica. That was coupled with the fact that at that point in time, the government had introduced a improved new variety for scallion in Jamaica. And I'm speaking specifically now within St. Elizabeth and in Manchester. These are in the southern part of the island. And these are largely located on the rain shadow. So the mountains would, based on where they are, they would get very little rainfall and it would be very hot. In setting the context as well, scallions in Jamaica are, within these two parishes, are produced year-round. So it's a ratoon crop and the food supply is always there. So we had a long drought period. We had a newer variety, was larger, the leaves were more succulent, and they were larger. Remember, we always had the beta armyworm, so the numbers were within levels that were not alarming, that were being managed. Now, the drought situation caused for stress on the plants. And then after that period, we got a long period of rain. Now, this facilitated rapid growth of the plants and an explosion of the beta armyworm population. We had losses up to over $140 million of scallion in Annonians in St. Elizabeth and Manchester. And so there was desperation. Farmers were using pesticides and mixing all kinds of concoctions. We were desperate for a solution. Now, with the aid of the FAO and the Research and Development Division of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, we were able to come together to develop a risk assessment tool, which was an early warning system. Now, this system needed to be proactive. It needed to be influenced by the number of factors that would influence the beta armyworm. So you looked at the population dynamics, you looked at the crop phenology, you looked at the farmer practice, you looked at weather influence, and also market was also playing a role into that. And these interactions would result in the explosion of the beta armyworm from time to time. So we wanted to significantly reduce the losses and we needed to come up with an area-wide approach to management for beta armyworm, and it had to be sustainable. So from there, we were able to develop a system that incorporated this weather information. So we looked at temperature, we looked at rainfall, we looked at a number of other factors that I won't mention just now. We looked at some critical risk parameters. We looked at the egg sacs of the beta armyworm. These egg sacs would carry from anywhere between 50 to 150 eggs. Now, on scallion and onions, they are the pest is quite protected because of the vertical leaves, and the chemicals that were available, the pesticides that were available were largely contact products, and so they were not able to penetrate through to the leaves. And beta armyworm, as you know, anywhere that it occurs, it is quite a problem. They are quite tolerant to pesticides, And so it was quite bearing in mind that they were hidden inside the leaves. Now we looked at the number of egg sacs, we looked at the number of larvae that were in the field. We looked at the mean damage that was being caused by this pest. We looked at the host that was around. We looked at, and then beta armyworm has a wide host range. So it would feed on a number of things, though it prefers scallion and onions. It would feed on practically anything, watermelon, mango, tomato, you name it, it would feed on it. Now, farmer compliance was also looked at, so whether or not they were treating based on the numbers, because there was a threshold that was developed for this as well, and whether or not they were managing their weeds, and looking at all these factors that would influence the population. We looked at the pheromone catch, the trap catch, to get an indication of the number of adults that were in the field. And we also looked at the price. If the scallion price was low, it would mean that there would be very little activity that was being done in the field. And so it would also influence the population because nothing was being done. And now our fields were very close together. And so it would facilitate the rapid introduction of the pest into other fields, increasing the population. So we collected this information, put it into a system, and that would give us a risk level for the beta armyworm. So based on all these factors, it would tell us whether or not we have a low risk for beta armyworm population increase, whether or not it was a medium risk or moderate risk or very high risk. And based on the risk level, then we would be able to employ a prescribed set of actions. So we would take this information monthly, and this risk level would be determined. What we would use then from there on is to disseminate that information to our farmers. And that would be done via a number of media. So we would look at text messaging, we'd look at town criers, radio. And so the advisory that would be developed, generate the risk, would be to the farmers for them to take action. I'm going to move a little quicker. So a number of factors are in place. A number of factors were at play within the system. We would go through with the farmers with respect to going through the biology of the pest, looking at the life cycle, looking at management of the weeds around, looking at constructing the pheromone traps, and also looking at pest forecasting. So from this system, we would also be able to get an indication of what the population for beta armyworm would be in the next 3 months. And so that you can take early preventative action as well. Now, farmers have been, I'm not gonna go, I have some video plays here, but based on the time, I'm just gonna skip over it. So I just wanted to indicate that the farmer.
Sorry to interrupt you, Francine, you have 3 minutes left.
Say that again?
You have 3 minutes left.
Okay, okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to skip over these. So needless to say that this system has been working to give us an indication of what is present in the field, what we are likely to see based on the different factors, the climatic, the weather influences, and based on the other factors that would impact the population. And just trying to get back to my original presentation. And so what we have been able to do is to move from where we are now in terms of putting in those practices that are needed to reduce the population level, or alert our farmers that they need to do something as well. A lot of times when the price is low, they would not harvest. And so you would have food supply readily there in the field. And that would also help in facilitating growth in the population. And from there, what you would have is that we'd have to have some kind of intervention with respect to value added products. So the products would be harvested and go into scallion mash or so forth in order to get that food supply out of the area. Slide is not moving. So in wrapping up, I just wanted to mention that these biodiversity support systems would impact our value-added systems, such as making us more resilient and my slide. In making us more food secure. Now, food security cannot be considered without looking at food safety. And so all the different factors involved in food safety would be needed, such as your documentation processes, looking at your worker health and hygiene, the quality of your water, which we would have looked at before, soil amendments, your pesticide use, how you use your land, your animal management, and what we will go into next week, harvesting, transportation, traceability, and looking at those issues. So we would look at this particular factor of our objectives in looking to add to our improvement of our food security, increasing our resilience, reducing our waste, lowering our emissions, and also building a more climate resilient agricultural system. So thank you very much for your attention, and my apologies for the many challenges I had in the presentation.
Francine, that is the nature of a resilient agricultural sector. And if it's going to be led by resilient experts, then we need look no further. So excellent, thank you. I want to, with deep regret, announce that Dr. Rankin has arrived and has joined us. And since I was usurping his position as per usual, I am now forced to hand over the baton to Dr. Rankin. And to thank you for tolerating me thus far. Over to you, Dale.
Thank you very much, Professor Maxime. I appreciate it, the compliment. Colleagues, thank you very much. Francine, really appreciate your taking the time to present, and we did our best to accommodate as best as possible, because we often don't have female presenters, and certainly not in agriculture in the sector. And the able way in which you presented, despite the challenges, was really, really, really well done. Christian, thank you. Excellent filling in, brother. Really appreciate that. We're going to go straight to the Q&A. I have the permission from the hosts. Thank you very much that we can extend the Q&A a little bit. So we'll try and see as much as possible what we can take in. So here is a question. Some of them are comments, some of them are questions. From Etienne, she's asking, or here he's asking, having seen how shipping containers can be tossed about during hurricanes, the question was container model subjected to varying speeds, wind speeds, or duration? I'm not sure that is directed to any particular presenter, and I'm not sure if it's related to the presentation. It says, Sivanistic to say that there is a general requirement of all the wharfs in the Caribbean when a hurricane is threatening, that the Grand Train cranes should not pack containers more than 2 stories high. And that's as much as I know, and that I don't know if Christian has anything or anybody else wants to say anything. Yes?
Yeah, I think Dorian is particularly wanted to find out. I presented on the use of shipping containers as part of the protected agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah. But to answer his question is that, yes, it has been a concern of ours. The container of concern has been secured to a concrete foundation And no, it hasn't been subjected to varying wind speeds and durations, but it has been fastened to a concrete foundation. I can't tell you if that would be enough in every given circumstance, but subjecting to wind and speed duration is something that we have highlighted as, what we need to do. Either we do it ourselves or we follow what the research has shown.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of questions and take some of the hands. Now, next question. What are some of the measures in place in the Caribbean for green transitions? If I were Steve Maxime, I would say that we should be careful of questions like these, because green transition means a lot, especially in politics in Jamaica. It would mean shifting from one party to another. So I imagine that they're not talking about parties, that they're talking about the green economy. Who will take that? Francine, can you take that one? Francine?
Yes, I'm here. Just taking me a little time to unmute. There are a number of things that are in place. The extensions services have been, their capacity has been increased with respect to looking at moving into organic farming considerations. There is also other organizations that will help in the transition as well. That is a specialized area, yes, but also there are other initiatives, say for instance, by the government, such as even with respect to pesticide use, that moving away from the more toxic chemicals as well, that are looking for more environmentally friendly options that are available for farmers as well. That just a few of the initiatives that are there to help in making the transition. A number of efforts are also being made with respect to increasing farmer capacity with respect to able to manage the resources that they have as well, that would help limit very harmful and delicate on the environment. Their efforts with respect to moving into more integrated crop management systems. So you are looking at moving away from your monoculture type systems into looking at a more integrated system that would better facilitate biodiversity going forward as well. Granted, we would need more work in making this transition, but there are some things that are being done that will help that process.
Well, thanks for that. I saw a hand up. I'm not sure, I'm not seeing it now. I'm busy, I'm not sure if you can help me with the hands. I want to do a hybrid between the hands that are raised and the questions that are being asked. So if you can help me to identify whose hands are raised, I would appreciate that very much. In the meantime, let me go to another question. So I have a question here. Can you, Francine, this is directly for you, from Shanyon asking, can you please explain the advantage, disadvantage of open field agriculture versus protected agriculture? I suppose either of you could answer, because Christian, you could also chime in on this one as well.
Right, and I think so I know I heard some of them coming out with Christian's presentation. One such thing is with your protected systems, you have better management of your weather factors, such as with your controlling of the amount of moisture, because you're now eliminating the rainfall and controlling that, and that will directly impact on your disease management. For instance, you are better able now also to produce physical barriers for pests, and your pests in consideration that they can also be vectors for viruses, and pest management being also a serious constraint for production is another one that you can look at as well. protected systems are a little more pricey in terms of their setup. They are more of a long-term investment. And Christian, you can let me know whether or not I'm going off track here. So that kind of investment is there, and it would be geared to more higher return crops as well. That would also factor into that. Your open field systems would be impacted by your environmental conditions. There would be very little that you can do there. And so you would have to now be mindful of your pest management options. With respect to your use of pesticides, they are a little more limited based on the labeling and what can be used within the system, as opposed to in an open system, which would be a little more fun with respect to your pesticide use. Christian, you can add a few more.
I would agree. Thank you, Francine. I would agree with that. I don't see protected agriculture systems replacing open field because one of the most pivotal drawback of protected agriculture systems is that they are limited to a few or relatively few amounts of commodities that we can grow. You can, in most cases at least, you don't have a wide range of food crops being grown in protected agriculture systems, at least efficiently. It is very knowledge intensive, as Francine mentioned, and I mentioned earlier in my presentation. You don't have the benefit of the external environment and the bioeconomic resources, as Francine mentioned, working to your advantage in protected agriculture systems, quite a lot of them. Some of the advantages, the efficiency of the model, higher yields, high value crops, once managed well, once selected well. It really is dependent on the goals and the objective, what the person have in mind, and how this protected agriculture model would be integrated in perhaps open field systems.
Thank you.
Another one, is you would better manage and thank you for the clarification right here.
Oh, okay.
My apologies.
Because in Barbados, there's a cheese on bread. I can't say what you're talking about. Anyway, now there's something else that protected agriculture we should bear in mind. Christian, you made an excellent point. It is not a panacea. It is not a solution. Right, limitations. For example, there are some crops you cannot grow in protected agriculture environment at all. One such is strawberry. You need the pollination from the bees, all right? And you don't want to be in a controlled environment with bees all over your head. So there are some crops that cannot grow. By contrast, there are some crops that grow very well, like ginger, for example. It has a big nematode problem when grown in the open. When you grow it in the field, you can get 8 ginger rhizome. You can get 8 ginger rhizome from one little plant. When you grow it in the greenhouse, it has been scientifically proven to give you 80 to 1. So Christian, the thing that you were mentioning about productivity, that's one key and absolutely verifiable evidence that we have. One of the things that we did in the study was that the plastic that is used that becomes a nuisance, they actually cut the plastic up, use it inside the soil, and it creates poor spaces, and so that the soil was more breathable, and therefore the nematodes did not grow, and it gave a significant improvement in yield. In general, the general statistics suggest that protected agriculture compared to open field agriculture has a 4-fold increase because you can produce twice the crop in half the land area. That's a generic calculation. I don't know if it works for all crops, but I know it certainly works for condiments like tomato and so on and so forth. So that's just adding that there just to tie the conversation in. All right, I don't want to hog the show because I'm just the host. So let's go to another question.
Dr. Rankin, I don't want to
Yes.
belabor the point, but in looking at where we are with respect to climate-related natural disasters, for hurricanes too, depending on the system you have, you are also better able to manage in terms of in some systems you can actually lay the plants down, pull the sides and allow the winds to pass, and then quickly resume once the system has passed. So you have that kind of flexibility with certain systems as well, depending on what you're growing, as opposed to open field as well.
But Francine, you have provoked me to jealousy now, because when you mentioned that, I'm going to have to hit rather very hard, because I find sometimes that information is not value neutral. I'm going to give you an example. So when there was this big beet armyworm problem, everybody was quarreling about what happened. The CIMH, where I was working in Barbados at the time, was saying there is no excuse for that, because we were forecasting the drought 6 months before. We saw that there was going to be an El Nino. We told everybody there was going to be an El Nino, and yet we went to install and to invest without irrigation. So even when we know the information, and when a hurricane is coming, some of the fishermen go out to sea anyway. Why?
Yeah.
Because they said they're going to catch more fish. Never mind when they come on site, they're not going to be any refrigeration to keep them fresh. But as I said before, sometimes you can just give the farmer the information and hope they use it, right? Anyways, thanks for that comment. We'll go back to a number of questions. Okay, so somebody have a question about boar. I don't know what is control of boar. Anybody can think what is control of boar? What measures would you consider best for the control of boar? Is it better not to harvest, or to harvest and to do value added? Christian, is that for you? What is boar?
It's beet armyworm, so that's
all
main.
right.
So
All right.
could you repeat the question for me? I didn't hear clearly.
Also, the question is, what is the best control for beet armyworm? Is it better not to harvest, or to harvest and then do value added if the crops are too damaged?
Okay, thank you for that question. Now, beet armyworm is and so even for us here several years later, though we may not have had outbreak in recent times due to a number of differences, including this assessment, it is a combination of different things. So when I refer to the farmers not harvesting based on the price for the product, then it's something that you can understand, because they would have to expend funds in order to go into harvesting. But at the same time, if the crop is left in the field, it only serves to increase the population because of the increase in the food supply. So the recommendation for management is area-wide, because they're so closely related that one farmer performing his actions in his own field is not sufficient enough because it impacts on his surroundings and his neighbors. And so the recommendation in an area-wide management system is to harvest once it is ready. Value added also has to be considered, because if the price is low and there are those challenges, then you would need an option for the farmers incentive for the farmers to harvest and to get that additional food supply out of the field.
All right, thanks for that. I'm trying to rush through as many questions, so just asking our presenters. Those who are posing the questions, please pose them as concisely as possible, and I'm asking our presenters to be as briefing your responses as possible. Christian, this one is for you. Somebody was asking if you could elaborate a little bit more on greenhouse. I'm not sure what aspect of the greenhouse they wanted you to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not certain either. But I saw earlier in the chat that the person, it seemed as though they wanted a bit more time for greenhouse to be elaborated during the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know what particularly, maybe Shannon could elaborate her question a bit more.
Right. Okay. Just to say though that there are different versions, and what we have in Jamaica and in the Caribbean is really not a greenhouse, right? It's really a shade house, right? A greenhouse by US standards is something that prevents the escape of heat. What we have by contrast is a shade house, and there are different versions of it. There's one that allows for the actual escape of heat to the side, some have vents to the top. You have different double ventilated, all kind of different things. You have shiny stuff on the floor of the greenhouse to discombobulate the pest. So there are several different things. So we need some greater clarity on that. All right, Flemings, coming back to you again. This question is, are the systems of fumigation and biosolarization integrated in the protected agriculture structure?
Yes, they are. I've seen cases where both are used, especially the biosolarization, and done before protected or a crop cycle is placed inside the protected structure. And yes, biofumigation often follows a crop cycle.
Okay, great, thanks for that. Francine, coming back to you. Crop suitability mapping, you mentioned that as one of the interventions. Can you tell me what is one of the limitations, the clear limitations of this method?
Well, in just looking at the model that I used as an example, and Dr. Rankin, I would throw to you when I'm finished regarding this as well, that it only looked at temperature and rainfall, and there are a number of other factors that would determine your suitability, such as your pest population. So it is to be used within the context that it has, so that I think that particular model is from 2011, and so would imagine improved would be needed for that, so that you can playing in a factor as well.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's very useful. I must say, it's a useful tool. But to tell everybody, you have to understand what it is saying. The first thing is that it uses global climate data. It doesn't use regional outputs. We have now gone down to less than 10 kilometers in resolution in terms of climate data. So that is one thing. That you mentioned something that is absolutely right. It only uses temperature and rainfall. There are several other factors that impact on the suitability. And I think the biggest weakness, but I did say this to my good friend, Dr. Riney. I was saying that the two modeling could go hand in hand. And that is plants make autonomous adaptation based on the change in their environment. So this is for everybody to remember. So for example, the studies are up in the air now. At what point does the increase in CO2 is not balanced by the loss because of warm temperatures, right? And drier conditions. For now, the study suggests that up to 2050, the plants can CO2. But what we find is that you get more CO2, you get a lot of leaf spotting, and the plant naturally produces less stomata. So it doesn't benefit from an increase in CO2 anymore, right? So those kind of dynamic responses are not captured in crop suitability modeling. And I've been at pains to point that out to my friends to say, yes, it's a good thing, but don't just use that and say, because you need a temperature of 5 degrees Celsius or 25 degrees Celsius to grow sweet potato and rainfall of X, that once you don't have it, you're not going to be able to grow sweet potato in St. Elizabeth anymore. No, that's not true, because farmers find a way to go higher up. The plants naturally adapt to the new conditions and so on. So those are things that must be taken into consideration. So I wasn't trying to trap you at all. I was just saying that it's something that we should consider.
No,
all right,
no
Christian.
problem.
All right, Christian, one question for you, sir. Somebody made mention of the kind of water that you can use in your protected agriculture system and soft water and all of that stuff. Would you recommend the use of a hybrid between solar energy and rainwater harvesting to facilitate drip irrigation? Let me tell you where I'm going with this. In 2004, when we had Hurricane Ivan in Jamaica, all the greenhouse farmers were suffering. There was one guy that got a grant from us, from the small grants program when I was there. And what he did was to ask for a change of use of the funds. He harvested rainwater, used a solar pump to pump it on a hill, and then allow gravity to feed all his greenhouses. So he had both light and water when nobody else could produce. So of course he made a killing. Well, after that, everybody started producing greenhouse with solar energy. I mean, this was necessity being the mother of invention. And clearly this was a case of climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation in one, even though he never called it that. I mean, is this a kind of intervention that you think farmers should do more?
Yeah, yes, Gail. Gail, you answered it with the case study better than I could probably put it across. But one of the slides I showed in my presentation is that I think we really need to leverage more of what we have in our environment to run protected agriculture models. So we have an abundance in sunlight, and that's something that I think we could take more advantage of. So kudos to this gentleman. I think is spot on. We need more of that. Actually, I think that was also another question in the chat before it was removed. So that's for that question as well.
Okay, all right. I'm trying to see what else we have. There are some other questions. So there's a request for us to complete the registration. Okay, Ms. Webb, this is for you. In the crop suitability model, why did cucumber's suitability increase from 86 in 2030 to 93 in 2050? Do you have an answer for that?
Without getting too much in the technicalities, which I'm not
yes,
there
yes, please.
It would indicate that where the 2050 the factors such as your temperature and your rainfall are concerned, that as the crop grows, it would favor the environment for the to increase based on that the location and this the factors there as well. That is my interpretation.
I think one of the things
that the factors would favor its development. Yeah, you're right. In general, cucumber is one of those crops that, well, I must say, everybody must remember that not all crops are going to suffer adverse impacts from climate change. There are some crops that will do better, some that will do worse. So we must always bear that in mind. Depending on where the location was, if you look at the state of the Jamaican climate report, I encourage everybody to look on the PIOJ website. There's also a state of the Caribbean climate report on this CBD, the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB website. It shows that there's some areas in the Caribbean that will get cooler, some will get warmer, some places will get drier, some will get wetter. So it's dependent on the change that is going, relative change that is going to take place. I know there are some places in Jamaica that will get more favorable climate. And therefore, if you apply the index there, you will see an improvement. So thanks very much for that answer. And somebody was asking about irrigation lines. Have there challenges in moving from one crop to another? Kirsten, can you talk about that? When you're moving from one crop to another, one storage area to another, I mean, how do you treat that? How do you deal with the drip lines? I mean, they're very expensive. What can you do to safeguard your lines? When you have to plow again, how do you lift them up without breaking them apart? That's a perennial problem. Can you shed some light on that, sir?
I certainly can't. I don't have a lot of experience in using drip irrigation in shade houses or protected agriculture. I'm more familiar with the use of hydroponics and vertical farming inside these structures. And even inside such a structure, you do have very labor intensive activities at certain points of crop cycles. For example, in hydroponics, when you finish a crop cycle, you have to clean the system, all the troughs, and depending on how large the system is, there really isn't a lot of technology out there to reduce the intensity of the activity, the labor effort. So I would say that's one drawback with the system, but also an area for, it's a necessity, and as you rightly said, it's an area for invention and innovation. That would be my input to this concern.
Thanks. Do you have anything to add to that? You're muted.
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. We have one last question. Okay, so this person is trying to make me blush that they seem to believe that I have a broad knowledge of shade house. If I'm going to do a presentation on it, and if I don't mind, if I could send some information, the slides. I have some information on shade houses because I used to fund them when I was at the small grants program. We were grants up to $50,000 per project to fund. One of the problems I found in general was this. One, everybody wanted to fund a shade house because they wanted to put their logo on it, Christian, but nobody was willing to fund the full thing. So for example, Francine, USAID would fund the greenhouse. Somebody would fund another greenhouse up the road. And I'm saying to them, okay, so why not USAID fund the plastic, somebody else fund the metal, somebody else fund the drip irrigation, somebody fund the irrigation, and all the logos go on it. You get me? One other guy said, well, what I did, he went to, the second thing is that people didn't recognize that though it is a shade house, there's some soil conservation and other mechanisms that you can use that will work just as well. So this guy went to the sugar factory and they were having a problem with the dunder. The dunder is the wash that you get from the cane when you're actually going to purify it. It is considered a waste material by NEPA or the National Environment and Planning Agency if you pump it straight into the water, right, Francine? You know that. So he said, give it to me. He took that and used it to irrigate his crops. And guess what? Got a bumper yield. So he said, he just didn't say anything to them. He said, just give me it. And everybody was trying to figure out what was this guy doing? Well, of course, once they learned what was happening, it became a scarce resource. Everybody wanted it. The third thing I find is that we don't do proper recycling in the greenhouses, all right? For example, one guy went to Riverton City. Riverton City is a place in Jamaica that receives 60% of our municipal waste, which really should have been closed 20 years ago, but it's still open. He was taking all the tires, cutting off the top of the tires, putting a hose in it, running drip lines through it, and planting a lot of crops. You name the crop he was getting up to 10 times, 80 times what you could get in open field. Christian, can you guess what happened after somebody learned of that? Just want to guess? Just a wild guess. What do you think happened after somebody found out that?
Dale, I'm not getting your question for some reason.
Okay, so this guy found a way to use used.
No, I heard that, but the question.
So the question is, can you tell me what you think happened after they found out what he was doing with the tires? He could get the tires. He could go to the dump and pick up as many tires as he wants. You want to tell me what you think happened after people realized that is what he was doing with the tires? Just a wild guess.
They started doing the same thing?
No.
No.
They say he had to pay for the tires. He had to start paying for the tires, Francine. Something that was a fire hazard, that was a health hazard, and so on. Somebody got jealous. So that's how we operate in the Caribbean. It's a crab spirit. You know, you mustn't get ahead of me. The last thing I want to say about greenhouses now is this. Now, there's no one structure that will suit every environment. For example, if you're farming on the north coast of Jamaica, like Lucy, Hanover, that kind of stuff, the greenhouse that you farm, it could be 30 feet by 100 feet by, pretty much about goes 300 square foot by 20 feet high, something like that. You can use a trellising system and you can get tomato trees that are 30 feet tall and you can reap 400 pounds of tomato every 2 weeks, guaranteed. You will not have that situation in the Blue Mountains, for example, where you have frostbite and all of that. You have to do a different kind of design. When you come to Devon in Manchester, your greenhouse has to have a different shape. It has to have a crooked thing at the top. You have to have one side of the greenhouse higher than the other so that the convection pulls the air out. So what I found was that people went overseas, saw design, and everybody came home and wanted to do one design. And I'm saying no. And finally, we don't have temperature regulated greenhouses in the Caribbean. I spent a month in Israel learning about greenhouses. That's probably where my knowledge came from. And at the time when we were in the greenhouse, this was before the smartphone, the guy was using a banger's phone or a flashlight phone to monitor temperature, fertilizer, rainfall, irrigation, everything to his greenhouses. And his plants leave the greenhouse and arrive in Amsterdam to bloom on Mother's Day for each of the European states. And that is 2001 technology. So you could imagine where they are now. All right. So I think we have just scratched the surface, Christian, of where we could actually go with this. Really, really, I don't think we have done a lot at all. But I've spoken too much. So let me take another comment. Somebody said once you can control weeds and crops, you could do well without additional tillage. Is that true, Francine? if you can control weeds, you wouldn't need to do tillage every season. Is that true?
There's definitely a place for minimum tillage, and weeds do pose a major constraint for, say, for instance, with onions, depending on the type of crop you grow and your location as well. So I would tend to agree.
Agreed.
But there are a number of other factors that would come into play, but weed management is critical as well.
Okay, Christian, any two words on that?
No, nothing to add on that deal.
Okay.
So.
All right. We're going to wrap now. Christian, can I start with you? Just give us your 30-second parting shot.
Yeah, I agree with your closing on the protected agriculture, and I believe there was a question earlier concerning the future of protected agriculture for the Caribbean. And certainly, again, I want to just go back to how we could utilize and take advantage of the abundance of the resources that we have around us, and design our protected agriculture systems with that in mind, rather than simply, yes, in some cases, it's as you presented, you're able to modify and adapt existing protected structures, but I think we have the opportunity also to design our own with our climate in mind. Thank you very much.
All right, excellent. Francine, your 30 seconds. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. My location has gotten quite noisy, but I really want to thank you for your attention. My apologies again for the many challenges which I had, but there is just so much to say about open field climate smart agriculture that we really haven't touched the surface here. So there are a number of other things that can be said that we just didn't have the time to go into, but we are not where we want to be, but we are not where we used to be. And so we will forge ahead. And I think planning in going forward is an important part, because in looking at the challenges that we will face and using the resources that we have available, we can become more resilient as we go forward with these adverse effects from climate change. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that. There were some other questions, but they were just comments, really. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all. I myself had a challenge this morning. I was online, and you couldn't believe, of all persons I had to ask Mr. Maxime to deputize for me. So I was desperate. But anyway, I thought he did a good job. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Desi. Thanks, Francine. Even without the technical difficulties, Francine, we were engaged by your presentation, and you could call us sexist if we want, but we said there was no way we were going to cut the first female presenter that was on the show. No way that was going to happen. Despite what Steve was saying, we said, no, we're not going to do that. But anyways, thank you very much. Christian, excellent as usual. Really, really one of the bright minds in the Caribbean. We look forward to seeing you take on your PhD, sir, in short order. Thanks to everybody else for being a part of the seminar. I really regard having 83 persons, we're now down to 75, but 83 persons at the time when the Olympics is going on, as a great success. For me, that is like having 100 and odd people, because really and truly, at the end of the day, we're competing with a number of competing interests. The recording is going to be available for those who will join later. So let me thank everybody and to say, God bless you, have a wonderful day, and see you next week when we move towards something else, towards the climax of this wonderful webinar series. Thank you to PPCR, thank you to our donors, IDB, thanks to CARDI. Thank you, everyone. Trust you had a wonderful day. Please have the rest of your day. God bless you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Dale. Take care. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.